Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed Hamas's proposals for a ceasefire. Netanyahu ordered troops to prepare for moving onto the city of Rafah in Gaza's far south, where more than 1 million Palestinians have sought refuge. However, the US Secretary of State Blinken says he still sees space for an agreement to be reached. Blinken says he warned the Israeli leader against actions and talk that inflame tensions.
What I can tell you about these discussions is that while there are some clear non-starters in Hamas's response, we do think it creates space for agreement to be reached. And we will work at that relentlessly until we get there.
Netanyahu told a televised briefing that he'd ordered troops to prepare to operate in Rafah and that a total victory by Israel over Hamas was just months away. But he warned that accepting the Palestinian group's demands for a ceasefire would not lead to the return of hostages, charging that it would only invite another massacre. In Beirut, Osama Hamdan, senior Hamas official, urged all resistance factions to continue the fight. He urged caution against Israeli treachery during the final quarter hour of this confrontation. Of the hostages released as part of a temporary ceasefire deal brokered in November, it also puts pressure on the Israeli leader. Adina Moshe said, and I quote, "I'm very afraid and very concerned that if you continue with this line of destroying Hamas, there won't be any hostages left to release." An official from the mediator Egypt told the news agency AFP that a new round of negotiations would start on Thursday in Cairo aimed at achieving calm in the Gaza Strip. A Hamas source said the Palestinian group had agreed to the Cairo talks with the goal of a ceasefire, an end to the war and a prisoner exchange deal. Last week, a Hamas source said the proposed new truce calls for a 6-week pause to fighting and a hostage prisoner exchange, as well as more aid for Gaza. Negotiations have continued ever since. And the Palestinian Health Ministry said 2 men were shot dead by Israeli forces in the Nur Shams refugee camp near the northern West Bank city of Tulkarm. The UN chief said he was alarmed by reports Israeli forces would push on into Rafah, which is crammed with more than half of Gaza's population. Guterres said, and I quote, "Such an action would exponentially increase what is already a humanitarian nightmare with untold regional consequences." Well, for more on this, we spoke earlier to our correspondent, Jodie Cohen. Jodie, what have been the latest responses to the proposal for hostage releases and the pause on the fighting, of course? Is there still hope a deal can be reached?
Israel accepted the US, Egyptian, Qatari proposal. Hamas gave a counter-proposal, including calling for a permanent ceasefire and reportedly the release of 1,500 Palestinian security prisoners, including 500 who are serving time for murder. Now, Netanyahu has said that there'll be no surrender to what he called Hamas's delusional demands. I asked Israeli government spokesperson Avi Hyman if Israel still has hope that a deal can be reached. He said that the last deal came about through military pressure on Hamas and suggested that the strategy would be now to try to reach a deal in the same way. Now, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's on a tour, remember, of West Asia, he said that there are clear non-starters in Hamas's response, but believes that there's space for an agreement to be reached. So there's lots of work to be done, he said, and he's also going to be meeting some of the hostage families on Thursday. There's huge anguish amongst the families. Some are pushing for more to be done to get a deal reached. Some are saying that this shouldn't happen at any cost, and they believe that Israel should press Hamas militarily until Hamas asks for a deal. In the meantime, negotiations are said to be continuing today.
Well, there's certainly lots of negotiations and diplomacy going on today. Tell us about the summit being held in Saudi Arabia, according to reports.
Following Secretary of State Blinken's visit to Saudi Arabia is reportedly hosting a ministerial summit on creating a unified Arab stance for a post-war Gaza. Now, 5 countries are participating. There's Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, the UAE and Qatar, and Palestinian officials are also reportedly going to be attending. Now, some commentators are suggesting that this summit suggests a willingness on the part of these countries to participate in Gazan rehabilitation and Israeli integration in West Asia. And the stance would include an irreversible pathway to a Palestinian state that's likely to include a number of reforms. And the US State Department has said that Blinken has discussed revitalizing the Palestinian Authority with President Abbas. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has said that he's been saying for a long time, he believes that the Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves with none of the powers to harm Israel. He's been saying that the Palestinian Authority must stop supporting, teaching and funding terror, and also that Hamas needs to be defeated. Now, the summit is also going to be reportedly focusing on strengthening an alliance against Iran. Remember, Israel's Defense Minister Gallant has said that Israel's defending itself on 7 fronts against Iranian proxies and against Iran itself. The US troops, we know, have been coming under fire in Syria and Iraq, and Houthis have been targeting global shipping, and Blinken has suggested that Iran and its proxies are trying to sabotage progress in the region and an escalation in violence. So it remains to be seen what the outcome of this summit will be, but lots of diplomacy and negotiations happening today.